Well, good morning, everybody. And thank you for joining us as the audience. And thank you very much to the panelists that will also join us today in this important conversation around social support mechanisms. My name is Bobby Peake, and I'm the Director of Groundwork. And I'm also the Commissioner on the Presidential Climate Commission. And I've been asked to take us through the process today. We have 2 hours for this key discussion. There are 8 key invitees who will share their thoughts and will allow us to work beyond the problems and understand what change is needed. I'm going to be a hard facilitator because with 8 speakers, we are going to need to be brief in order that we can allow for an engagement. The aim of this public roundtable is to bring together selected commissioners, experts, and thought leaders for discussion around the social support measures that are required to give effect to a just transition. The events will examine salient issues around increasing social resilience in South Africa through basic income support, retirement support, and disability support, among others, as well as increased climate resilience to disasters and extreme weather events that are going to be visiting us and already are. The discussion will aim to inform the design of the Just Transition Implementation Plan currently under development with the Presidential Climate Commission. I would like to introduce you to our various speakers that are joining us today, our key people that are going to be giving comments. And firstly, I would like to introduce you to Professor Imran Velodia, Professor of Economics and Pro-Vice Chancellor, Climate Sustainability and Inequality, and Director of the Southern Center for Inequality Studies at Wits University. In late 2019, Professor Velodia was appointed by President Ramaphosa to the Presidential Economic Advisory Council. We also have Peter Wolpe with us, who is an urban energy and climate change practitioner. She's a prolific author and thought leader in several areas salient to the just transition, including gender, energy poverty and access, low carbon development, and policy engagement. I've worked with her quite often at a local government level on numerous projects at a local government level. We then have Dr. Bongani Mwale, who is a commissioner with the PCC, and Dr. Mwale is a community activist and philanthropist and has 23 years public sector and non-governmental development sector experience and has served as the technical advisor to the MEC for Health in Mpumalanga since 2019. And that's what I'm most excited about because health is big for Groundwork personally. Then we have Promise Mabilo, who is the coordinator of the Vukani Environmental Justice Movement in Action, a community-based organization in Malahleni, Mpumalanga. And Vejma was one of the applicants who was successful in challenging Minister Creasy, the president and government on air pollution in the Highveld through the deadly air case. Promise is an environmental activist and an alumni of the Groundwork Environmental Justice School. Commissioner Janse Yarabi is also joining us today. He's with the PCC. Janse is head of Agri-SA's Natural Resource Center of Excellence. He also serves as Agri-SA's Legal and Policy Executive Officer. In this role, he has endeavored to ensure and improve on enabling legislative and policy environment for a sustainable South African agricultural sector. We have Matshipiso Makabane, who is the CEO of Green Business College and the coordinator for the Gender and Energy Network of South Africa. The Green Business College is a college dedicated to building green entrepreneurs by uniting green skills with business know-how. We also have Sinzelwe Matembu, who is a researcher at the Center for Social Development in Africa at the University of Johannesburg and has worked as part of a research team looking at the impacts of youth employability programs under the Sikaya Youth Assets Project. Our most recent work involves a qualitative study looking at how stakeholders respond to the national minimum wage. And finally, we have Renessa Shweni, who is actually with me in the surrounds today, and is a former mine employee and resident of Carolina who works for Mandla Community Development. She has worked with various NGOs who seek to collaboratively and meaningfully work in the Highveld, and she has been key to various pieces of research in the face of various documentaries about the Highveld. She also works, and Momandla works, from issues of childcare to resisting corporates. First, I'll provide, as we move ahead, a few opening remarks, set the scene. I'll then turn to each of the panelists. And then I would like to facilitate a discussion amongst the panelists and bring the audience in. And I'm hoping to be able to do that all within 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we have 45 minutes for the audience to put forward their suggestions and questions in the last hour. We know the Presidential Climate Commission is a multi-stakeholder commission or body. You can visit the web and find out more. We like to think we discuss issues frankly and come to a consensus view on matters. We, of course, do not think we represent the sum of society, and that's why we have these engagements. And that's why we try and facilitate processes such as these that can make input into the just transition. In 2022, the Cabinet adopted the Just Transition Framework, which provides an overarching frame to guide the transition in the years ahead. And we are now, as the PCC, developing a Just Transition Plan for Cabinet. While some workers and communities may be able to transition to new jobs and industries, others will require transition or long-term support according to their unique situations. Many people do not have work, with an unemployment rate at 43% in the broader definition of it. It is clearly structural, our problem, and will not be resolved by economic growth anytime soon. South Africa's current social security system has significant gaps, with no mandatory system for social security, pension provision, and no provision for people without income, but who do not meet the criteria to receive social grants, and that's in the ages of 18 to 59. We must consider that 56% of South Africa's population are poor, as measured by Stats SA, against the upper bound of poverty level in 2015. This is not a good statistic for South Africa. The Department of Social Security has proposed a comprehensive reform of Social Security and retirement provisions. In considering comprehensive Social Security reform, it is important to factor in the requirements for social support within the just transition. In addition, individuals and communities will require support to enhance their climate resilience. This is critical for where people live or work. This includes resilience to near-term impacts like floods, droughts, extreme storms, and which is going to impact on how people live in the shelter and the services that they receive, which we know that many services in South Africa presently are a challenge and are dysfunctional, as well as the long-term impacts that reduce water availability and food security, because climate change is going to put pressure on that. We need to also recognize that poverty in South Africa is a consequence of development and not the absence of it. So we need different ways to look at how we address poverty. And it's really important to remember what Peter Alston said as the UN Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, that the failure to eliminate poverty and inequality is a political choice of global elites. And we want to break that as the Climate Commission. Poverty imprisons people, often keeps people at home because it costs money to go out. It costs money to look for work. It costs money to start even the smallest business. It costs money to get out into the world, to catch a taxi, to get data at an internet cafe. It costs money to send kids to school and to get to clinic. It costs money to organize with others in the community and to hold politicians and big business to account. So on that note, I hope that I have given us a quick feel for what will be coming at us over the next 2 hours. And I would like to now turn to Professor Imran Velodia to kick us off and to start the process. Thank you. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and for the invitation to speak today. I'm kind of really honored kind of here. The chair is asked us to be short, so I'll keep my I'll keep my opening remarks really, really short, and I really just want to make 2 points. The first is that the kind of climate change problem kind of, I think, is the quintessential kind of problem of inequality in the world, and kind of inequality within South Africa. So if you look at the emissions data by class, and I had some to share, but I'll just speak to them. Kind of really what liking emissions data, and here we kind of talking about the cause of the problem. It's quite clear that it's the rich countries that are the cause of the problem, and within countries such as ours, if you look at emissions data by household income, the kind of striking feature of South Africa is that our upper income households kind of emissions are kind of broadly equivalent to countries in the global north, and the bottom end of the income distributions emissions are broadly in line with countries that we would classify as low income countries. So looking both globally and inside South Africa, kind of at the emissions data and the data on who's going to bear the costs of mitigating the problem, I think what is clear is that we have to be thinking about compensation schemes that transfer that transfer resources from countries in the global north to countries in the global south, and within countries like South Africa, from high-income households to low-income households. There can't be a solution to the climate change problem without some sort of compensatory schemes. That's the first point. The second point, then, is how should we think about about social policy programs within that framework? I would argue that there are potential upsides to the climate transition that we have to make, and that we have to be thinking about our social policy interventions as not simply transferring income from one group to the other, but we have to be thinking about what the links would be between our social policy programs and interventions in the productive economy. The kind of social programs that we would want to design to deal with these problems, I would argue, have to be creating new opportunities, have to be designed to create entry into the productive economy for those who don't presently have that access to. So I would say that simply thinking about this as transfers of money as social policy program, thinking about social policy programs that redesign what we would classify as the productive economy, and that means redesigning kind of entry, and also kind of thinking about the vested interests that kind of really stop millions of South Africans from kind of having a share in the productive economy. So, Chair, I'll kind of stop with those opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thanks for being so clear on those two important points of inequality and of trying to ensure that everybody is in the productive economy. Peter, can I turn over to you?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to focus on two sides, and it kind of follows very nicely, I think, on what Imran's raised. And I was thinking about this, and we do have a social support system in place. And where did it emerge from? So if you think about 1994, government was faced with redressing the extreme injustices and inequalities, not only of the apartheid system, but a legacy of decades of colonial regimes. And what they had to do was to what they did was introduce a system of social security to bring social inclusion to those who had been socially excluded for decades. And I think it's important to think back to that period. You know, what do we mean by social exclusion? It meant in South Africa that the majority of the Black population were excluded from economic, political, and broad social and cultural opportunities and resources. So social exclusion is where citizens are excluded from access to health, education, and other essential services, and will generally experience high levels of poverty and unemployment. So in a sense, so what is social inclusion? That is to enable citizens to participate fully in society from an economic, welfare, and political perspective. So in 1994, that it was critical to address that, and it still remains critical today. If you think back, the Constitution states everyone has the right to healthcare, etc. I'm not going to go into detail there, and that the 1997 White Paper on Social Welfare also promoted welfare policies. So we have a social welfare system that kind of addresses broadly three levels. One is services such as social grants, health, education, and subsidies for basic services. We have social insurance, which is protection against illness, unemployment, etc. And then support for those who have been discriminated or have been abused, and labor market programs. And in fact, so we are recognized as having the highest level of welfare spending amongst emerging economies. So now let's look at, you know, the issues that both you, Bobby, and Imran have raised around climate change and a just transition. And social inclusion is it's always been critical for us since 94, but it's even more critical now, because we know jobs are and will be lost. We know livelihoods will be impacted. We know that the poor and disadvantaged are most affected by climate change. So what we're looking at is really critical today, and how it gets brought into any of the implementation plans being looked at around the just transition. But what we know, I guess, is that the system isn't working, because we still have huge levels of inequality and poverty. And that's not only from an income perspective, and wealth, but also race and gender and where people live. So coming to what you raised, we must focus on what must we do so that it becomes integral to the just transition process and is not just a silver bullet. And I hope I've got a couple more minutes I want to raise.
No, Peter, you actually just have 1 more minute. We really need to move on. You
okay.
can come back again.
Yeah, okay. So I think there's been a growing support for a universal basic income guarantee rather than the social grants. And I can talk more to that later. I think one of the issues that both you and Imran have raised around the political economy and vested interest links with how our budgets are developed and where we focus spending, and how that supports the political economy and not redistribution or health and education. So that's an area I would like to hear maybe from the audience. How do we shift that? I think our social security system is fragmented, run by different ministries, departments, and delivery agents. So we really need to streamline that and look at how we develop a comprehensive social policy. One last point, very short. We also must recognize and take into account social reproduction, whereby women are providing a lot of social protection that is unrecognized, I think, and unpaid. Okay, I'm done.
I will breathe a sigh of relief that after your extra minute, you definitely included that social protection for women. So that's really, really important, Peter. Thank you very much. Dr. Bongwani Mwale might not be with us. Am I right? If so, let's move on to Commissioner Yansa Rabi, please.
Thank you, Chair. I represent the agricultural sector and principally work for an organization that represents commercial agriculture. And that place has been a unique position where a person has to admit the shortcomings with respect to social security in South Africa and the agricultural sector in particular, especially as it relates to young people and agricultural workers and women in particular. The agricultural sector is extremely vulnerable, obviously, to the effects and anticipated effects of climate change. And in that context, social security is going to become more and more important for enabling a vibrant and sustainable agricultural sector and food production sector as such. And then also ensuring this concept of food security. Having said that, the task of primary producers in South Africa, farmers, is to produce food. Secondary obligations include the social security measures and the responsibilities that should be the responsibility of farmers as such. But for that, we do need assistance. So in keeping my comments short, I think there are a couple of key elements and key messages that the agricultural sector can bring into this discussion, including suggestions to how to address and improve on social security measures in South Africa. In preparing for today's webinar, I've read through a number of documents, and they do paint a dire picture for food production and the state and situation of farmers and farm workers in South Africa. Essentially, what is needed is that there needs to be an extension of legal coverage to agricultural workers that needs to be complemented by additional measures to ensure effective coverage for such workers. To allow, for instance, for flexibility in timing and the amount of contributions, and to facilitate registration, administration, and practical measures that need to be implemented as soon as possible. It's essential that we assess the special needs and gaps of agricultural workers and adapt to those specificities, in particular to women and working people in the agricultural and other rural areas. Importantly, and as I suppose a key message, is that in developing and implementing integrated and coherent social security policies, we need to link those social protecting policies with other policies. For instance, to promote employment creation, enhance access to credit, improve food security and nutrition, improve occupational safety and health, and reduce evils such as child labor, and to ensure effective application of labor standards. In this regard, the agricultural sector needs considerably more assistance and guidance and policy development from national government. And I hope that the Presidential Climate Commission can assist in this, in making sure that the agricultural sector assumes its position in the center of the discussions about the just economic transition and climate change in general. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you, Janse. Thank you for picking up the issue of making sure this is not seen in isolation, but that the social policies need to link to the broader set of government policies around the political economy. And that's why for the Commission, this is about a just transition. You don't hear the Commission only talking about the just energy transition. The Commission talks about a just transition because we believe, as you say, it's connected. So thank you very much for that. I do know, and I've heard that we've got our other panelists on, so I'm not going to go to Promise just yet because I know Promise has just come on. I'm going to give her some time to just get her breath. But let's go to Matshepiso Makabane.
Now, good morning, good morning, good morning. So my name is Matshepiso, and for me, there's a saying that says, empower women and youth, empower the nation. So as a college, as a Green Business College, we are pushing entrepreneurship as a way of just facilitating just transition, because even though green economy encompasses energy, environment, climate change, water security, and food security, including agriculture, we are focusing on the low-hanging fruits to say, where do we start? So we start by empowering women and youth and communities in really planting their own food for health and wealth purposes, so that they can eat what they know, what they've produced. And secondly, to process the same food so that they can keep it for longer, and they know what they've put in there, and there are no preservatives. So one of our climate smart courses is organic farming, and the other one is food processing, agro processing, where we teach people how to preserve the very food that they produce. So the other thing is, these days, people, because there are no jobs and people are hungry, people eat all the time. We are pushing entrepreneurship. We're saying people must plant and have food gardens for themselves and their families and their communities, but they must also be able to sell and have fun selling and making money with the very food that they are growing in their own backyard gardens. And so we're going all around nations, not only South Africa, but Africa, to really promote and make agriculture fashionable and make green fashionable, as you can see. So I have a lot of preserves that I go about teaching people. This is candied jalapeno, very nice, from the garden to the bottle, and then people can actually make money and eat healthy and really have hope. And that's what we promulgate. Thank you so much.
Wow, Matshepiso. I mean, that is perfect to come after Janse, because I think it is important to be able to understand how these two economies work around agriculture, the big agriculture, as well as the more and very critical day-to-day, type of township agriculture. I remember during the apartheid days, going into townships and looking in Umlazi and Kwamashu, how every patch of land there were millies growing, and now that doesn't happen anymore. So I'm glad you're pushing that. So, and I look forward to making sure that we should all be linking with you in taking this important work forward with regards to food, and also making it fun and making it an economy for people at a local level. Promise. I hope I gave you some time to get your thoughts together and to have a deep breath. Are you with us? Promise?
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Good. Hi, Promise. Cool. Go for it.
Yeah, I may not show myself because the network is a bit low, so it might disturb.
We will make sure that we fight for free Wi-Fi for townships, so the network is good everywhere.
Oh, thank you, Paul. For me, I'll just say a well-being economy is based on the idea that economic decisions making should start by asking what the needs of people are and how to fulfill them, rather than to have an economy that serves profit. In such an economy, it will be possible to do socially necessary work and reward it. I think rather than leave it to the owners of capital to decide what work should be done and should not be done. I think that it is increasing poverty in prisons to people. They often keep at a home because it costs money to go out. It costs money to even start a small business, to get out into the world, to catch a taxi, to get data and any internet cafe, to send kids to school and to get to clinics and hospitals. Also, it costs money to organize with others in the community and also to politicians and big business to account. As things are, social grants are most important instrument. I don't know whether I'm in the same question, but I'm just going to, I'm everywhere.
No, you're not everywhere, Promise. You just go ahead and talk to us about what you wanting and thinking and needing for on this issue of social grants going forward, or social infrastructure going forward. Yeah.
Okay. As things are, social grants are most important instruments for addressing poverty. But the existing grants leave adults of working age behind. The way our economy works needs to be changed. We need a universal basic income grant that will be implemented as a step in the direction of caring economy. Such a grant should not exclude caregivers from getting the grant. The economy needs to prepare to deal with the expected job losses in the coal economy. It might be easy, it can be easy to access to land reform to benefit in the first instance mining affected communities, particularly the dispossessed as coal mines approach closer. And also illicit financial flows which take money out of the country should be regulated more strictly. And well-being in coal-affected areas should be measured by including health metrics. Gender dimensions of government budgeting, spending, and grants should be made transparent. Also, financial flows which take money out of the country should be regulated more strictly. We need transparency on beneficial owners. I think the most important thing in our economy is that we have to prioritize, especially the needs. And in education system, health also, and we have to prioritize in the basic needs within communities. That will give us a proper direction, and it will save people from poverty, and it will also make sure that everyone is catered. And let us make sure also that there should be a social protection package that is adequate to people's actual needs, including municipal services. That's where I think I can end.
Thanks, Promise. I was trying to figure out how do I tell you to stop because we ran out of time. But I think, you know, it's important to reflect on people first rather than profits. I think, you know, that's been a call for many of the social movements on the ground and for many people who are in government now, holding high positions. When they were parts of social movements, that was also their mantra. So I think that's really critical. And just to say that thinking about, you know, things like education was critical, because when we visited as the Commission in Mpumalanga, in Xolobeni, and various places, education came up as a big issue. So thank you very much for that. Let's move on now. So Senzelwe Mtembu, and then we have Renisa, but Senzelwe, could you please join the group? Thanks.
Sure.
Share your thoughts with us.
Sure. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I think, you know, my first is just a comment on the Commission's work in kind of connecting the dots and not looking at the climate change transition and just that topic in isolation. So it's just a comment on that. And then also a reflection based on previous research, just and kind of wondering what the level of different sectors' engagement with the topic of climate change is. Some years back, we did a systematic review and we looked at the state of poverty and inequality in South Africa. We reviewed policies, we reviewed programs, and we looked at the level of meaningful engagement with poverty, inequality, social inclusion and exclusion. And so I think one of the takeaways is, you know, even just myself as a researcher based at the Center for Social Development in Africa, we haven't engaged on the topic of climate change, but I think there's a real opportunity for researchers, just as well as, you know, various sectors to engage in an interdisciplinary way and to look at, I guess, their areas of focus in connection with a range of other issues that we experience. So that's the first comment. And then the second is just, I guess, some lessons learned from a recent study, recent work we did on the social and economic effects of the Social Relief of Distress grant, the SRD 350 grant. And we looked at that from the perspective of informal traders. I think we know that when it comes to social grants, social assistance, there is this narrative around grant dependency. But I think there's a lot of work that's been done to show that grants play a very important role in poverty alleviation, in the agency of those receiving them. And I think when we look at this SRD grant, we know that kind of for the first time, we had young people, so we had youth who were unemployed, who weren't obviously eligible for any other grants, receiving this grant. And so it introduced new constituencies in our communities. So young people, as well as the working age, many of whom were chronically unemployed before being able to receive a grant like this. But even when it comes to mothers who receive the child support grant, they were able to receive a grant for themselves for the first time. And I think we do need to look at, yes, we know that this sort of grant was introduced as a shock responsive mechanism during the pandemic. But I think it did remind us of the importance of enabling resilient communities and the role that cash transfers can play in enabling this resilience. But the other thing is obviously, I think cash transfers are only one component of social protection, and so we do need to look at things more holistically. But I just think not forgetting the role of cash transfers, especially for that big group between 18 and 59 who have been excluded from social assistance. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Nzela. Sorry, I was talking to myself. You saved us a bit of time. I think it is important. I mean, and thanks for the type of heads up on the commission trying to connect all the dots. It is a crazy task trying to connect all the dots. There's always a challenge within the commission about whether we should connect those dots or not. And there's, it's a conflict internally. But I think we recognize that those dots must be connected. That's why we developed the framework, which tries to connect those dots. It's not perfect, but yeah. And yes, it's important that we view this process beyond just a cash transfer. So yeah, I think, am I clear that Bongani is not going to be with us? And if he's not, I'm going to turn over to Renessa. Renessa Mshweni, are you with us? I know where you are. The question, are you with us, everybody else?
Good morning, everyone. Bobby, I will never forgive you for this. I'm sorry, I cannot put on my video. I am actually at EJS school in Pietermaritzburg, so I had to take a few hours off just to be able to be part of this webinar, which I am very grateful for. My name is Renessa Mshweni, and I come from Womanda Community Development in Mpumalanga in Carolina. And I deal with a whole lot of issues within my community. So firstly, I'd like to thank the women that just spoke. You'll have said a mouthful. You'll have mentioned basically everything I wanted to speak about. My main issue is how the PCC has come into our communities. They've taken down all the information that they could have taken down. When are you guys coming back? When are you going to brief these communities again? Because as community members, as community leaders, we are forever holding awareness campaigns within our communities, getting our communities aware of what is this just energy transition and how is it going to benefit us at the end of the day. But now the issue is, as civil society, we are preaching this word, but where are the big guys? The big guys need to come back into our community and they need to mention that they've taken information from our communities and these were the outcomes and how are we going to deal with them. Secondly, we have so much of land available. I heard Uses Masidi mentioning the farming aspect and stuff. We have so much unrehabilitated land available in our communities. Remember, Carolina is a mining affected community. We have close to 12 open cast mines and about 6 unrehabilitated pits. So if you think that if these pits get rehabilitated, how much land will be available for the women, for the youth to be able to use that land for farming? Another point I'd like to mention on is the point on the social grants. Fine, we thank the government for giving us that 350, but as women, if you really think as women, what can you do with 350 rand? Like you can't even buy a 5 kg braai pack and a 2-liter oil and a 10 kg maize meal. It's not enough. So why doesn't the government open up greener jobs for our youth, develop our youth? There's so much happening. I heard them speaking about greener jobs the other day, but what's happening to the youths now that are studying to go into the mining industries when we are speaking about closing off mines? So we must look at that. Another thing, this 350 has actually brought up the rate of drug and alcohol abuse in our communities, if you really look at it. Because whenever it's that date for them to get paid, the town becomes full. Everyone around town is drunk. In the night, you find people walking around under the influence of alcohol and also using drugs. So we also need to look at that. My perspective on this, or my opinion on this, is that our government needs to stop with this 350 rand, and they need to give us jobs. They need to develop our women. They need to develop our youth. They need to get all of the DMRE needs to come in, and they need to sort out this unrehabilitated land. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Renese. I mean, there's a contrary view that has been put to the table, but a view that also speaks about, as Prof said early on, how do you bring people into the economy? You know, not only give people money, but bring people into the economy. And that is about looking at the damaged spaces that has been created by the present economy and trying to figure out how do we make those spaces, such as land that needs rehabilitation, how do we make that as part of the social package that can take us forward, so that we're not only reliant on a cash transfer. So I think that has been a thread, Renee, so that has come through the discussion this morning. Is about get society into the economy. So people, we are a bit ahead of time, believe it or not, and I like that. So I think before we get stuck into getting some suggestions from the floor, I want to just give our panelists an interesting question to consider, and that is, you know, there's been a big discussion around the need to be able to be concerned about climate resilience, and maybe the question should be asked is there, you know, do you see as the key informants today, do you see an alignment between the climate policies that South Africa is talking about and the social protection frameworks, you know, or are there gaps that need to be revisited? So yeah, is there alignment in our policies between climate and social protection frameworks, or is there gaps, and how can we deal with those gaps, because, there has been a discussion about the climate and the economy. Who would like to respond? And we'll have a couple of questions going until the hour. And then I think we would like to make sure that the audience starts thinking about and encouraged to ask questions, and also to put suggestions in the chat, in order that we can, because all these suggestions will be recorded by the Commission, so that we can take these forward and consider them. And for those that are already done, thank you very much. So yeah, back to the panel. Alignment between climate policies and a social protection framework. Do we have it? Are there gaps, and how can we ensure alignment? Who would like to respond?
I'm happy to say something, Chair, if you like.
Please, yes, please do, Prof.
So I would say we don't have alignment. I don't think we have ever in any society had to deal with the magnitude of the transition that we're going to have to deal with for the next 30 odd years, and the implications of that transition for our economic and social policy are quite extreme. I think we kind of really have to think substantially beyond grants, and I say that for three reasons. So the first is, I think we need to ask ourselves the question: is our objective to keep existing inequalities as they are and live with that, or do we have a more ambitious objective of to transform both in terms of climate change, but also transform in terms of the inequality that I think is a key characteristic of what our society is about. I think the kinds of grounds that we've been talking about would go some way things exactly as they are, but that they won't really transform the society. I think secondly, there's a lot of evidence that public expenditure programs have huge kind of economies of scale, and I think that's a discussion that we have to have. That comes back to questions about the capacity of the state to run social expenditure in kind of education, in health, etc. But that's an important debate, and we should have that debate. Thirdly, I think we must start from the premise that we're a country, a sort of country in the global south with an unemployment rate of 35% or so, depending on whose numbers you use and how you classify. The basic discussions of a kind of the basic income grant, at least in the way that the mainstream climate change conversations have that debate, it seems to me are based on kind of societies that are in the global north, where levels of unemployment are low and where levels of income are high. I think we have to start this conversation from our existing situation and build within that the big transformation that we have to do. And I think unless we kind of really think about social policies that kind of interact with the productive economy to bring people into that, I think we're always going to be straddled with large segments of our population paying a pretty high price for this for this transition, and it would be those that are least able to pay for it who will unfortunately bear the highest cost.
Prof, thank you very much for those reflections. And yes, I think we do find that as a big challenge within broader South Africa as to who is dictating this climate change debate, and and through which lens are we looking at climate change. And I think it is important that it does start from the lens of promise, the lens of people living in the high veld, the lens of those that are unemployed and are not in the economy. I think that is important. And I think a new economy, offers us great opportunities to make sure that people are part of the economy. Before I get other folk to move on to the next question, Neil Coleman is with us from the Institute for Economic Justice. And Neil, I would like to just bring you on quickly to share a few thoughts. I know there's a bit of a helter-skelter over the last couple of days, whether you guys are going to make it or not, and apologies for that, but please, yes, share some thoughts with us.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks, Bobby, and hello, everyone. What we can do is share what we would have presented at today's forum if there hadn't been this confusion. We've looked at the Just Energy Transition Plan. And I think it's interesting that in a number of places, there's talk of the need for income support to deal with the displacement of workers in affected sectors, as well as support for communities. There's a figure that is proposed in the plan of 5.6 billion, to be precise, on page 66 of the plan, for coal workers, page 126. And there's mention of income support in various places in the document. The question to the PCC is, what is the plan? What is this income support that is envisaged? Has work been done on that? And what is proposed? We would certainly be interested in engaging with that issue. And I think that, there've been a number of references to a universal basic income guarantee or some form of basic income. And of course, the SRD grant forms the basis, forms the platform, as the president has said, for the introduction of some permanent form of basic income. And we are looking forward to seeing an announcement in that regard over the next few months. Clearly, the 350 Rand, as a number of speakers have said, is a very, very small number, and is less than half the latest food poverty line that has just been released yesterday. But it's clear that whatever form of universal basic income is introduced, it's going to start off at a pretty low level. So the consensus within the presidency and the Department of Social Development is that you're probably seeing a form of basic income introduced at the food poverty line, which, as I say, is a bit over 700 Rand now. Clearly, that is not a compensation for a full-time coal worker who is displaced from their job as a result of the transition to renewable energy. So our view is that, yes, universal basic income is a very important intervention, and it's not a welfare intervention, it's an economic and development intervention. We've seen from the studies that have been done that the introduction of significant amounts of income into communities has a significant stimulus effect, which also has implications for the supply side or the production side of the economy, as well as one of the things that the PCC has identified, which is the question of self-employment and entrepreneurship, something that a number of speakers have spoken about, care work, etc., etc. So it does have that stimulus impact, and in the context of climate disruptions, including the transition to renewable energy, it helps to stabilize the poorest and most vulnerable communities and provide this stimulus. But it is not a form of social protection to deal with workers and communities who are displaced and negatively affected by the energy transition and by climate change, in particular the energy transition. That requires a dedicated form of social protection. And that's why we're asking what is this reference to income support in various places in the JET IP document. So our view is that there needs to be a dedicated form of social protection for workers who are displaced, and that needs to be dealt with at a number of different levels. It can't be that retirement funds are pillaged, pillage is not the right word, but that retirement funds are drained to provide for workers. Those are deferred wages of workers. It must be that there is a form of social protection which is introduced. And there's some international dimensions to this. We've seen the International Labour Council resolutions from the ILO conference this year. There's the loss and damage fund. Is there any potential application of this loss of damage, a fund that was agreed at COP to assist workers who are displaced by the energy transition? So I think these are critical questions. And finally, what is the role of collective bargaining in these issues? We're talking about value chains, coal value chains, but we're also talking about renewable energy value chains. What are the forms of financing and taxation that can be introduced? The Department of Labor, I think, needs to apply its mind to this and look at guidelines for negotiations around the just transition. So I think the PCC has introduced some very interesting, as another speaker said, holistic dimensions to this, including active labor market policies, the issues of entrepreneurship, social protection, and so on. But all these things need to be brought together into an integrated discussion. So, yeah, it's unfortunate we didn't have an opportunity to make a presentation, but these are the sorts of points that we would have made, and we would be happy to send something through if that would be useful. Thanks.
Yeah, Neil, definitely it's important to send as much through as you can to the Secretariat, because the more information the Secretariat has, the more information the Commission has to be able to make decisions. But I think what you've said is appropriate. I don't think we would have been able to deal with a full-on presentation today, but as you've indicated, we need to be able to look at, how do you deal with in a dedicated manner with workers? But also, I think what's really important is to be able to understand that, and you've said it, how do you deal with climate impacts? And climate impacts upon everybody, not only on workers. And I think social protection systems, as Prof says, needs to be able to consider that broad, as climate impacts hit South Africa and impacts upon the broader economy, but also impacts on the very, very local economy. When a person's buzzer shop is washed away, how do we develop systems and a dedicated social protection system to respond to that? So yeah, I think you've done well, and thanks for coming on, and apologies again for the confusion. But I did see two hands up. Yes, Peter, and then Machi Peso, please.
Yeah, hi. I just want to respond to your question and a little bit what Imran and Neil said. So there isn't an alignment. I think we really need to look at that. There are gaps. And I think we sit with a massive opportunity at the moment, given the JET IP and the work of the PCC around the Just Transition Framework. So we have an opportunity. So I really think we need to look at the two sides of the coin, as it were. The one that Imran, you spoke to, the interaction between the productive economy and social policy. And I think there's a few people have talked about the economy, the vested interests and so on. And I think we need to look at to what extent that is enabling or disenabling the social policies that are on the table. But that's a complex, long-term process. And then there's from the bottom up and what we can build from within. And I think that's where the notion of universal basic income guarantee. I think the private sector could play a role, as well as government, in guaranteeing work, in the whole work being done around reskilling, and it's not just only the energy sector. We need to look very broadly here. And I think that it's not just an alignment around policy related to social policy, but all the work that's happening at the moment around the just transition. And I just want to pick up something that Ranisa was saying, that the PCC has been in there engaged, and they're wanting you to come back. But there was something that struck me around people's real understanding of what's happening. And so we need to still remain almost at the basics, and what Matsupiso was saying about food, that building people's capacity. So you're working at both spectrums. And just one last thing, I was engaging with one or two people for today, and apparently there is the work happening in countries like India, and Imran, you may know more about it, where there's guarantee of work, and the risk is taken by government and the private sector. So the people are getting some work. I need to explore that more.
So yeah, Imran, if you can just remember that and respond to that a bit later, but I'm going to ask Matshidiso to please come in. You had your hand up. I don't know if it's still up. Yes, Matshidiso, it's still up.
Thank you. You know, for me, I'm answering the question again, is there synergy or, alignment between the two policies, the climate resilience, the climate protection policy, and the social protection? And I'm saying, and everybody else did say there are gaps, there is no alignment. And for me, even beyond that, there is no, there's always a gap between even a very well-written and well thought out, well consulted policy and its implementation. I'm going to make a very quick example of the very 350 special grant, the COVID special grant, that there were gaps. First of all, they gave room for even further corruption, and secondly, many people did not get it, that were supposed to get it, and it was just confused. And the last thing is like okay, like the other lady said, Subramani said that it actually propelled more drunkenness rather than actually spending it on the real food and the real basic needs. And for me, the answer is, let's look at entrepreneurship, building SMME capacity and collaboration, because we are here, we are pushing, and instead of grants, giving grants, let's look more in terms of rewarding or incentivizing, or at least matching the very grant provision with some activity or some level of effort. So let's shy away a bit from really giving people money and dishing out money just like that, but let's reward and let effort and let's incentivize effort, especially in terms of entrepreneurship and some form of production or work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matsupi. So before I want to move on now to and open the process to people that are listening in, and please, ask your questions. I'm not too sure. I'm sorry, apologies for that nonchalance. Can people ask questions, or must they put their questions only into the chat? So you can answer that in the chat for us. But before we go there, Prof, do you know of any systems that were spoken of by Peter earlier on? I see that Ian has responded to Peter saying the social provision of employment falls on the Indian National Rural Employment Mission. But Prof, over to you.
So I don't. Perhaps Peter wants to talk about that. And unless she's referring to the employment guarantee scheme in India, but
yeah, that's what, and it was Julia Taylor told me about it, Prof. So that's why I thought you might know more. We had a brief conversation, and it's I think we could learn from that. We need to start making changes from the bottom up. But I see, Ian did reply as well.
So kind of, I wouldn't have anything to add, except that I think what is interesting about the Indian experience is that it's the kind of employment guarantee system there is kind of an attempt to link social policy with trying to create trying to create opportunities in the economy itself. And I should perhaps just kind of clarify that I use the word productive economy because that's the term that is used. That's not to suggest that social policy programs by themselves are not part of the productive economy. My point really is that we have to be much better at making those links. And I think the African kind of economist Tandikam Kandawire, who kind of sadly is no longer with us, but I think his work is the most profound in making clear the kind of importance of the link between social policy and kind of creating opportunities in the economy itself. His work was largely in Scandinavia, and the big message I think from his work is that that countries in Scandinavia can deal with these transitions much more effectively because their social policy programs are kind of have always been very much tied up with kind of developments in the economy, and not designed simply to kind of alleviate poverty. They're designed to bring people into the economy and create opportunities for people.
Yeah, that's really important. Thanks, Prof. It's about making sure, again, and it's been said often, is how do we bring society into our economy? And I think we need to be able to recognize that the economy in South Africa, the economy in India, is happening at a variety of different levels as to in Scandinavia, which is much more formal and much more type of market oriented. But yeah, we have a variety of different economic models, from township to Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So Neil, I see your hand is still up. I don't know if you want to say
Sure.
something. Yeah.
Sure. Just on the Indian Employment Guarantee Scheme, the NREGA, the way it works is that a member of every household is entitled to a certain amount of work a year. It was 100 days a year, and then it went to 250, etc. There have been a lot of problems with the scheme, including a lot of corruption. But it is a very interesting scheme which has involved millions of the poorest Indians. And what's also interesting about it is that if you volunteer to do work and work is not available within, I think it was 15 kilometers of where you live, then you are entitled to receive the equivalent income that you would have received if you had done the work. So that is the way in which the scheme works. The issue, though, in South Africa is that, with the levels of capacity challenges in the state and the problems with infrastructure programs, possibly leaving aside the presidential employment stimulus, which Kate Phillip has worked on, there are a lot of challenges with rolling these things out in the immediate term. And we've seen the level of hunger in the country is so widespread. 1 in 5 households are sending a family member out to beg currently, according to a study by Wits University Health Department. So the level of hunger in the country is extreme. And the advantage, contrary to what somebody said, the level of corruption in the SRD grant, despite all its problems, and the IEJ and Pay the Grants are currently, as people may know, taking this to court, challenging the massive exclusion of people from the SRD grant. But that aside, it's able to very rapidly transfer income into people's pockets with minimal corruption. And by the way, I mean, I put something in the chat around this question as to whether people are abusing the money and so on. With all these things, there's always a level of abuse, but all the research shows, both in South Africa and internationally, that these income transfers are used very, very effectively by poor people, both on essentials, but also to save and invest and so on. So yes, we should look at international experiences like the MREGA, the Indian scheme. But as you said, Bobby, we also need to look at the specificities of the South African situation, the realities that we are confronting, the challenges that we are confronting.
Thanks, Neil. I mean, I just want to quickly touch on this issue of, cash transfers and the issue of it being abused, etc. I think what was said by the comrades from the Highveld is yes, that's cool, it's there, and we see all the problems with it, but we want to be part of the process. We want agency, we want to be part of the economy, and that's really important. I think what's also important is to get it to everybody, so there's no way of leaving anybody out. So the universalness of this is important. So everybody gets it, and for those that can afford, just pays it back in tax. So I think so nobody falls out of the falls through the cracks. I'm looking for hands up before I turn over to the next question. I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to turn over to the next question, and that next question is the following. How should social support be integrated with other just transition measures such as education, training, and active labor market policies. So it's about the implementation of social support, you know, and how does it get integrated? Yeah, any thoughts on that from the panelists? How do we integrate social support with just transition measures such as education, training, and active labor market policies? Any of the panelists want to be able to respond to that?
Shall I jump in, Bobby? I won't talk
Yes,
for too long to give other people a chance.
Yeah.
I do think we need to integrate. You know, it relates to your first question about alignment, and I think we have to integrate all that is happening, you know, around the just transition. So the skills and health and education and food. How do we do that? That's like the big question. I don't know. I think the work being done within the PCC is an opportunity to really investigate how we do that, and it's not about creating more and more departments or institutions that can do it. We have to find a way of aligning. And if you look at what's going on in the social support sector, it's what I said very quickly in my introduction, that there are many ministries and there are outsourced companies and well, people involved in just the one element of social support, and there are many. So we have to align all of that so it's not covered over many ministries. I don't know how that happens, but it's yeah, I'm grappling with it. I'd love to know.
Yeah. No, I think what you said early on, Peter, and this is important, is that in 1994 we became inclusive, right? And I think there's no doubt that we've made great strides from where we were to where we are now. We've got a constitution, we got policies in place, and many of us fought hard for those policies to be in place. The question is about the implementation of that. So I guess for the Commission and for government, I would say that I can't speak on behalf of government, but you know, to say that how do we use what we have now? Is there a creative way, I would ask the panel, to be able to get at what we got now and start implementing it, rather than thinking of a variety of new things and then still have to implement those new things? Or is what we have, just because it hasn't been implemented, it's a complete failure? And I want to disagree with that. I think we've got good stuff there. So yes, how do we implement what we have to lead us towards the just transition, I guess is the question. Richard Worthington, I see your hand up. If you want to have a go at that, responding.
Thanks, Bobby. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks, Richard, we can.
Thanks. Yeah, well, maybe two suggestions, although one's more maybe a question. I mean, I'd agree that we have to build on what we've got, because there is some support getting out there more than in other countries in our region, and we don't want to lose what we've got, but we do need something much more comprehensive and systematic. And I forget which of the panelists, maybe the second or the third, was making the point that we need system change. The system itself, but we can't wait for that to be doing what we can in terms of social protection and what we can afford to do if we take a big picture look at our economy. So I think that at the moment, we still have free basic electricity, not really working very well, but it's a system that's been around long enough that we might not want to, see how we can use that better. And there have been ideas thrown around about doing this. And, that is one form of social protection, ensuring that people have access to electricity. And that to some extent addresses these concerns that some people who are reluctant to talk about system change have about, oh, well, if you give money to people, they'll waste it, which a couple of people will, but for the most part, we know they don't. The research supports all of that. So I'd like to, but the PCC is not going to be able to come up with such a system. All PCC can do is advise, and there will have to be a much more concerted attempt by government to address both the shortcomings in the municipal financing model, which is also an issue for the free basic electricity because it's been used as a kind of way of supplementing a system that isn't working and not necessarily benefiting the people it's supposed to. But it seems to me that working towards a universal basic income makes all the sense in the world. But in the meantime, maybe building on the SDR grant, increasing that incrementally and increasing the reach of it, while putting something further in place. And there's a lot of bright minds on this. Our big challenge, I think, is to reach a point where we say, okay, now we're going to sit down and within the next however many months, we're going to come up with a consensus position. Instead, it's just back and forth all over the place. And government hasn't taken responsibility for this. The PCC is doing its best to enable government to do this. But yeah, ultimately, this needs strong political leadership. And I would love to see the ANC adopt a political platform going into the next elections that is premised on what the earlier panelist was talking about, addressing people's well-being, not just chasing investment all over the place, but putting well-being at the center of the budget and doing budgeting better. I'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Richard. Well-being is important. I mean, considering the great, challenges we have with employment and with poverty, and so I think that is an important start. Imran, did you want to add to this debate?
I mean, I think it makes sense to build on what we have, but I think it's also important to be clear that what we have is not designed for the challenges that we're going to have to face. And I think maybe one way to kind of think about this is to start from sort of trying to understand what is climate change going to do to our economy. So it's going to create major structural changes in how kind of production happens, and I think there's likely to be quite substantial kind of churning that comes up out of that. Some people are going to win and some people are going to lose. It's going to involve quite substantial kind of geographic changes to the way our country operates. So if we go back to the energy question, it's kind of likely to focus the economy from the eastern side of the country, and more of it going to the west, because of the nature of that energy transition. So a big geographic kind of change. Kind of a third sort of we know that we're going to experience a lot more extreme events that are going to impact on livelihoods especially in the agricultural sector. I don't, those are 3 examples. I can go on and on with the examples. I don't think our social policy programs are really kind of designed to deal with those issues. So I think we need to start with what we have. But I think those kind of challenges can employ us to think a lot more creatively about how we put in a social protection system that is really going to be kind of designed for those. And just one final point. I think the kind of gender dimensions of this shouldn't be underestimated. The burden of care that is going to be placed, especially on women, is something that has to be part of how we think about these social programs.
Well, let's spend some time on that. I mean, the issue around gender, and for also the audience to come in. You know, how does government ensure that the social protection reaches the most vulnerable groups, namely women and youth, you know, who are going to be facing this crisis coming at us? Yeah, and how do you create more opportunities for women in this space? Just give me a minute. Yeah, so people, how do we deal with the challenge that Imran has put to us about, you know, considering the genderized challenge we're going to be facing going forward? And Renessa, you know, I know that you, particularly on the ground, work hard on for instance, issues such as childcare in the neighborhood. You know, could you speak about how Womandla would consider, you know, or put forward some ideas to respond to what Imran has said? I see Neil and Richard, but I assume those are old hands.
It's a new hand, but I'll wait.
So, yeah, let's wait for Renessa. Yeah, Renessa and Promise. Any ideas from your side, from your experience on the ground, is how do we deal with the challenge? As Prof said, women are going to be facing the burden going forward. How do we respond to that? How do we make it? How do we strengthen their hand?
Okay.
Thanks. Go for it. Is that Promise or Renessa?
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Bringing all people together, especially in this just transition, yes, it becomes very difficult in our space as community-based organization, trying to make sure that women are part of whatever that is happening, but it becomes difficult, seriously. But then what I think must be done is that we have, we build or we have centers within communities, that those centers that will bring people in and out, that will tell us whether women are interested to come in or not. Because now we see less women in our work that we are doing, and also the youth is not that much active. Yeah, we don't know whether it's because we are in a small space or I don't know, but the reality is that we have to make sure that we build centers that will speak about the issues, give more information about the issues that we are facing, and also make sure that everyone is coming in and given whatever that is is happening in those spaces, it will be more effective to have centers within our society that will speak on the just transition, and also not being specific on a just energy transition as we do more now, because we are having so many load sheddings that we don't even know what is all about. But then if we just say to people, the just transition is broader, and everyone will be able to say, but no, I love farming, I love to do 1, 2, 3. So it will become easy for people to understand that the just transition is not about energy, looking into energy only. Yes, what if we win the battle of energy? Then what do we eat? What do we drink? Because we need clean drinkable water. There are people who can come in and maybe saying that we can rehabilitate, we are interested in the water issues, we are interested in the waste that is all over, we are interested, then they will start seeing more things that have to be dealt with in the just transition space. But once because now we are more into energy, people think of all of them being in the space of energy, having jobs, having everything that they need. But what then if you are now having energy? So the centers will start building up momentum within communities and in the broader societies that we are working with, to know that the just transition is not only about energy, but you can also look to other things. Then women can also come up with good ideas to say, I'm good at this, but I need this to maneuver with what I have. So I think the centers is the big start of all the just transition that we need.
Thanks, Promise. I think it's really important to be able to get that message to be grounded, is that people on the ground have nothing. Just transition and climate change mean, I've often said this, mean nothing to people in townships. People want services, they want better homes, better education, better water, better transport. And that, if we can start delivering that with resilience measures, that will give us a good transition process. But I want to bring in Senzelwe to speak about youth, please. Tell us how, how do we bring youth in terms of social measures going forward, because they are the biggest grouping that are unemployed now.
Sure. So I think just in general, when we speak about vulnerable groups, I think it's important, one, to be mindful of the language we use, and to be mindful of I guess the way we perceive certain groups. Narrative that young people are lazy, are not active participants in their own lives is a false one based on some of our studies. I think we're all well aware of some of the barriers that young people and a lot of the work on youth, I think, has focused on the supply side. So we know there's a lot of youth programs, there's a lot of I'm just going to switch off my video because my internet is not great. There's a lot of interventions on the supply side. So trying to upskill young people, we also know about entrepreneurship kind of interventions. We know about the CETAs and a bunch of different types of learnerships. But one of the things we looked at in the Siaka Youth Assets project was, what are the different program elements that lead to the most success? And the biggest one was matching. So if we're not matching young people who are entering these training opportunities into an actual opportunity, a job placement, a learnership, or whatever it is, when the program comes to an end, what that does is it just creates churn. And so young people are hopping in between a number of the same or similar types of programs. So I think we do need to have more conversations on the demand side and see how we can bring employers in on this conversation as well. We're currently piloting a program called the Basic Package of Support for Young People. And that's based on, you know, a number of different pieces of research that shows that looking at young people just as job seekers, you know, that's not enough. We need to look at young people holistically. They face a number of barriers and challenges, you know, even to accessing job opportunities. So I think the lesson we learn from there is we can take the same sort of, what are the steps in assisting and supporting young people to transition and to kind of smoothen their transitions from school to work, or from a NEET status to being in an earning or learning opportunity, is we need a multi-sectoral approach. We need for everyone to sort of see themselves as stakeholders in the youth issue. And one of the elements to this program that we're currently piloting is having a community of practice of various stakeholders, from health to education to ECDs. And what we've realized is, for example, ECDs will not see themselves as part of the youth problem, or they won't see themselves as stakeholders or potential problem solvers for youth issues, until you bring them into a room where you make people understand that everybody has a role to play within a bigger topic and issue. And I think we can learn the same about climate-related issues. But I also think, you know, exposing young people to you know, climate-related jobs is important. I think they lack information, they lack productive social capital, but young people really are trying to improve their lives. We just need to bridge these connections for them. Yeah.
Zilwe, thank you very much. And I see Bulelwa and Shlangiwe in the chat, you know, also commenting on this and you know, making the point that we need to think of youth in a caring way, so that, you know, we can nurture and we can bring youth on, and rather than just having them to hop from one opportunity to the next, how do we really support the youth in a meaningful way and give them grounding, or give them the potential to be grounded. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Renessa and then Neil. Wait, there's one more. Let me just see, is there any other hand besides Neil? Before I go to you, Neil, Renessa, you dropped off for a while, but you're back on. And the question that we had early on is, how, you know, what do women need at a local level in a place where you know, provide care as well for young children? But what do women need from your experience to be part of the system, and that, yeah, that is just.
Hi, everyone. I'm very sorry for dropping off for a few minutes. Women need development. Women need development not only as jobs, but as entrepreneurs as well. We need to be given a space where we can open up and tell everyone what would we like to bring down the rate of gender-based violence, because in most cases, when it comes to the just transition, we are not just looking at a just energy transition in our communities, but we are also looking at change where we are not dependent on men anymore, but we can hold a household. Remember, when we grow up, we are taught about being mothers, we are taught about being wives. We need to change that aspect. We need to develop ourselves so that we can be able to change the mindset of the youth or of our children that we are growing up for the future. And we are also telling them that they need to be better. They need to build themselves and be less dependent on the other gender. So I would actually accept or prefer if the just transition, when it comes in,
we are taken into priority and we are able to make change. We are being given land. I've been speaking about this for, whenever I speak about the just transition, I always scream out that we want land, not only for agricultural purposes, but also for development. We want to own stuff as well. We just don't want to be there as workers, but we want to own. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renessa. I think it's important to speak about the hard issue of gender-based violence and to be able to recognize that we also have to get over that hurdle as part of this change we need in society, so that we, so that dependence is broken as well. And, land is, land, people, a lot of people still, and South Africa is still, type of land is an important politic in South Africa. Okay, Neil, and then we've got 10 minutes left. So Neil, I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk, and then we've got 10 minutes left. And what I would like to do is, if there are no further hands up and no further questions, I would like to give each panelist a chance to do some last comments. So Neil.
Thanks, Bobby.
Yeah.
I think that the PCC needs to avoid generalities. The question is, what are the policies and the interventions that are going to make a real difference in the areas that a number of your speakers have identified? It's true that communities around the country, regardless of the energy transition, are facing massive challenges. But it's also true, as Imran said, that we are facing a huge structural transformation in our society, and it's the job of the PCC to think through what those interventions are, whether it's in relation to women, whether it's in relation to workers or youth. The failure to intervene meaningfully, what are we going to see? We're going to see ghost towns. We're going to see massive retrenchments. We're going to see the social pathologies that we already experience multiplying. And so one doesn't want to be doom and gloom about it, but the point is these things aren't going to fix themselves. So when the plan talks about 5.6 billion being invested in dealing with the displacement of coal workers, where is that plan? And it's a genuine question. What is the proposal around those issues? What is the proposal around diversification of economic activities? Not the proposal, but the actual programs and investment that is going to take place. Where are women going to be employed in the renewables value chain? How are old workers in the coal sector, who are not really going to be reskilled and retrained and absorbed in other sectors, going to be assisted? These are the things. And what we find is that a number of policies that government introduces just do not, or considers introducing, do not speak to these realities. So with the SRD grant, the Treasury was talking about introducing a work seekers grant, which would only go to those who are actively looking in the labor market. And that would cut out millions of care workers, who are currently supported by the SRD grant. So, I think it's just an appeal to think in a rigorous way through the interventions and policies that are going to address the very important issues which people have been talking about. And if we're talking about social protection, that needs to assist those vulnerable sectors, but not only the vulnerable sectors, but all the communities that are going to be negatively impacted by these changes.
Thanks, Neil. I think, we are worried about generalities, whether that's within the JET IP or whether that's even within the Just Transition framework of the Commission. I think we all want to drill down and get to interventions that are clear, time-bound, specific, and that can show outputs. And I think it's important that that continues to be the thing that drives us in terms of how we advise and drives government in terms of how they do work. So thanks for making that making that call loud. Leanne, and if that's the correct order, sorry people, I've lost my screen again. Remove me from spotlight. Leanne and then Andile, or was it Andile then Leanne? You can fight it out amongst yourselves.
Thanks, Bobby. I'm happy for Andile to go ahead. Oh, okay. All right.
Go ahead, Leanne. Go ahead.
Okay, great. No, thank you all for this really important and interesting conversation. Maybe something I could add on to Neil's questions around generalities is a question around prioritization. I think it's clear from this conversation that social protection, as part of a broader structural transformation in South African society and various institutions is a real priority. And I'm wondering, how we are reckoning with this in the context of development. So where are the big development industrialization questions being considered in relation to the work of the Climate Commission and our climate goals? So for example, if there are industrialization policies around, let's say, gas development or green hydrogen that potentially compromise water security or could affect small-scale farming, etc. Where are those decisions being taken, and is the PCC engaging with those decisions? As an example, you have the DMRE saying we need to foster local development for renewable energy, at the same time saying it supports major gas developments that are, to be quite honest, contrary to our climate goals. So I guess I want to ask, how or where are the decisions around development that advances social protection being taken? And how is that being prioritized, both from a decision-making, national policy decision-making perspective, as well as in relation to the financing that goes behind that? It's a big question, Bobby, but I thought I'd pose it.
No, I think it's important to be able to make sure that the path we're going on, Leanne, is not compromised by things we're not aware of or things we're not engaging on as the PCC or society in general. And, government needs to, and I will say this, and government needs to make sure that the public is fully aware and is fully engaged in these debates. So you don't get, the PCC doesn't get 3, 4, 5 years down the line, but decisions are actually being made in a space we've not been questioning and the public has not been involved with. So important question to record and to please, as the Secretariat, to consider going forward, because I don't think we're going to have time to respond to that, but thanks for putting it on the table. Andile. Andile Mlambo. Yeah,
thank you so much for it. Yeah. I just wanted to give a quick comment. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Andile. Thank you. Cool. Go for it.
Thank you so much for this. So my thing was on social protection, and I think for me, it should not be a means to an end. I think what we need as a recommendation to the PCC, it's more job planning and small business planning. Because Bobby, if you look at it, it's very sad if you're going to create a over-dependent society, while we have the SRD was a part of a resilience plan and how quickly we come out of catastrophes. So that should be, the social protection should be a bridging gap. I think Neil also mentioned that instead of creating an over-dependent society. I mean, it's very sad if you've looked at municipalities, when we have local municipalities saying they don't have money, but they have services, they have water, they have this and that and that. So even municipalities are also dependent on the government, which I think is very bad. So we need job planning and skills planning as part of the process. I mean, if we know that young people are going to school, from primary school, high school, and tertiary, it'd be sad to have them go through all the stages, and post that, now we have to send them to churches to pray to get jobs, instead of creating a proper plan to say, if you go through these processes, this is the reward system. And while you are a job seeker, like Neil correctly put it, then there is this incentives, there's this system to cushion you while you're going through that. So that was my comment as we are closing up. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andile. And I think you've rounded this debate up. It's we're now out of time. We've got 4 minutes left. And you rounded this debate up nicely to where, Prof started this debate. And that was the issue of people being in a productive economy, people being part of the economy. And I think that's important. We can't see social grants, we can't see social support in isolation of the broader commitments that we got in our constitution. So thank you for rounding that off quite nicely for us. We have 3 minutes left, and if I'm going to just start off from the top. Imran, do you want to last parting words, Prof?
So just a final thought, and that's that there's a great danger in us seeing social policy as dealing with the downsides of the climate transition. I think there are some exciting upsides, and the more I learn and think about this, the more I think this is potentially a good possibility for South Africa to think about a different kind of an economy. And I think we need to shift part of our thinking on the social policy questions from seeing it as kind of dealing with a set of poverty and welfare kind of problems, to thinking about this as something that has to be linked to how the economy is going to change.
Thanks, Prof. Can't help but agree with you. This transition needs to be looked at positively in terms of how can it create a better economy going forward. Peter.
Yeah, very quickly. I think we need to remedy the fragmentation at the policy level around social support. But I just want to say, I love Promise's idea of a center, of developing centers across the country that can provide the support to youth, to women, to awareness. They might not be able to do everything, but should have links to local government, to some of the finances. So I think we should really seriously look at that. I love the idea.
Thanks, Peter. Transition centers. Thank you, Promise. And now it is you, Promise. What's your last words? Promise, you there?
Yes, Bobby, I'm here. I just want to say, sorry?
No, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for this, to be part of this meeting. And there was lots that I wanted to say, but because of time but I think whatever we have gathered, all of us will be prioritized and make sure that we achieve the goals that we want to see in our societies and in the entire country. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Promise. Commissioner Rabi, we engage very little with you, but it's a very important part of the world where you're from in terms of agriculture. Yeah, would you like to just share a few thoughts before we close?
Bobby, I couldn't agree more with most of what the speakers said, especially Leanne and Andile. It really echoed my sentiments on it. What I want to leave as a parting thought is that I do think policy makers and government and all of us, I suppose, at the PCC and in civil society in general, need to make sure that we sharpen our pencils adequately to make sure, and I don't want to say prioritize, but that we also emphasize the future. And that includes women and young people in particular with respect to social welfare, social security measures in particular. But this is where our potential lies, unlocking the future potential and future opportunities that that lie in a just transition. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you, Bobby.
Thanks, Commissioner. Machipiso, last words.
Okay, from me, my interest is really people being part of the productive economy. And I'm thinking the policy must adopt a bottom-up approach where we as foot soldiers inspire and do work on the ground. And as a result, we inform the higher powers, the policy makers, based on the action research that we have done. So I'm really committed. I have very few examples, even from other countries, from Lesotho, for instance, where the private sector, SMMEs, are organizing themselves so that they can inform the policymakers in terms of what will work for them to benefit and to create their own economy. Thank you.
Please get that information through to the Secretariat. Thanks, Machipiso. Senzelwe.
I would just agree also with the previous speaker, who kind of just basically was saying, or in my view, we need to use evidence. So we need to have a look at what's working, what evidence and kind of what case studies do we have that show positive gains or positive effects or impacts, and then how can we scale those up? So whether it's from a policy or legislative or programmatic kind of stance, even just from local level, grassroots level, what is working and how can we scale that up? I think that's the low-hanging fruit. But I also think this question about how do the different sectors engage more meaningfully with the topic of climate change and a just transition, I think that's really important to get everyone talking and to get everyone engaging meaningfully on this topic, because it does affect a number of different sectors. We just need to start thinking about issues in an interrelated way.
Great, thank you, Senzelwe. Renessa, final words before I see you tomorrow.
All right. I would like that the community voices continues to be heard. In everything that happens during this just transition, it should be for the benefit of the community, and it should be something that is just. It shouldn't be something that only the municipality takes into control and they do it, but the communities should have a voice and they should be heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Renessa. Yeah, and I'm committing on behalf of the Commission that we will come back and speak to the people we spoke to before. I look forward to it. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today in this conversation. The chat will be saved, it will be recorded. The Secretariat will think of how we work, and we will think of how we work with the ideas you put forward. This is part of an ongoing engagement within the PCC or by the PCC. Please look at the website for upcoming events and the recordings, and we look forward to engaging with you further. To the Secretariat who put this together, thank you very much for getting us through this and shepherding us through this important gathering. Thank you and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.